From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I am Estefanía Bravo, and this is From the South. Costa Rica Supreme Court has rejected the tax reform approved by the Legislative Assembly 10 days ago. The judiciary has asked lawmakers to modify 4 items on the reform. Now, the Legislative Assembly can either comply with the Supreme Court's decision or keep the bill as is. The reform was approved in a first debate with 35 votes. People have protested the reform for over a month now. One person has been shot dead in Haiti during protests after a ceremony for the anniversary of the killing of Jean-Jacques Dessalines. The shooting occurred in Port-au-Prince as hundreds of people protested for an investigation into an oil corruption scandal. Police officers are said to have fired live ammunition as protesters threw rocks. Earlier on, reports circulating on social media claiming that Haiti's president Jovenel Moïse had been shot. However, these have since been confirmed as false. Social movements and political organizations want authorities to be held accountable for these violent protests. Prime Minister Jean-Henry Sant has called on people to remain calm. Our correspondent in Port-au-Prince, Stacy Toussaint, has more details.
Opposition leaders and social organizations have taken to the streets to protest against the embezzlement of public funds. Demonstrators want to pressure the government to carry an investigation into the corruption allegation and charge those responsible. They have also asked the police to avoid provoking protesters and not to create violence. On their part, social organizations said the government is to blame for the death of a person during the demonstration. But police members said they will not tolerate any acts of violence and explained that all their measures secure the country. Prime Minister Jean-Henry Sant has called on people to remain calm and trust the government.
We thank Daisy Toussaint for that report, and a caravan of migrants heading to the United States from Honduras say no threats can stop them. A reported 3,000 migrants have reached Guatemala, where authorities are trying to stop them. Many have even started to ask truck drivers to take them as they make their way towards Mexico. The migrants say they can no longer tolerate the violence and poverty in Honduras. One of the banners say they are carrying says, "We are not leaving, they are kicking us out." According to the World Bank, 64% of the Honduran population lives in poverty. U.S. President Donald Trump has threatened to cut all aid to Honduras if it doesn't halt the caravan. Our correspondent in Guatemala, Mario Rosales, has more.
We
are on the way to the department of Zacapa, where hundreds of Honduran migrants continue moving in towards Guatemala City in order to get to the Mexican border. Some of them said they fear the police will try to stop them. For this reason, some groups separated from the main caravan so they could spread out and avoid getting caught. Last night, around 600 Honduran migrants arrived to the capital city. They say the caravan will continue their journey to cross the Mexican border in order to get to the United States.
We thank Mario Rosales for that report, and for his part, the president of Honduras, Juan Orlando Hernández, says the caravan was organized by the opposition to undermine his government.
The governments of Mexico, Guatemala and the United States have announced they will apply their immigration laws and further norms in line with their sovereignty. Hondurans should not get involved in this political game because it is inhumane. It is to be condemned. Today, the migrants are in danger. I cannot understand how somebody could use the misery of the people for political ends, risking their lives with children, with the elderly. This should not happen. This should not be allowed under the basic principles of human dignity.
But those marching as part of the caravan tell a different story.
Juan Orlando Hernández is only asking for a return because he will lose U.S. funding. He won't be able to ride around in private helicopters or expensive cars anymore. We will not return. Juan Orlando Hernández, I am not a leader. I am part of the people. And if I have to die for them, I will. We will fight our way north if we have to. Now, we only ask the Mexican government to let us through.
As the caravan moves forward, Mexican federal police are being deployed to the country's southern border. The police stated their intention is not to prevent migrants from coming into Mexico, but to aid the National Institute of Migration during processing. According to government officials, these measures are taken in order to maintain order and guarantee migrants' human rights. They also said that those who fulfill all migration requirements will be prioritized. Venezuelan Communications Minister Jorge Rodriguez says new suspects have been arrested regarding the failed assassination attempt against President Nicolás Maduro.
There is no doubt, thanks to confessions of those questioned in the assassination attempt against President Nicolás Maduro, that Julio Borges participated and is protected by the government of Colombia. We want to announce the arrest of Mr. Osvaldo Gabriel Castillo Lunar, alias El Capi. This 25-year-old was recruited for training in Colombia to assassinate President Maduro.
And on Tuesday, the Venezuelan government announced that it would stop using the US dollar for international and domestic transactions. Our correspondent in Caracas, Luis Tavera, explains.
The government in Venezuela is developing its strategy to combat what it calls a financial war organized by the United States. The minister in charge of the economic area, Tarek El-Aissami, announced new policies for the use of convertible currencies like the euro and the yuan, and a move away from the US dollar. He said that the dollar has been part of Venezuela's international transactions, but the financial blockade imposed on Venezuela has made it more difficult to implement the government's economic recovery plan. This plan that started almost 2 months ago with the introduction of the new currency, the sovereign bolivar. Al-Aissami said this would be part of a new strategy to stop using the dollar and allow the government to implement all the different components of the economic plan, which aims to overcome the impact of the economic war on the Venezuelan people.
The judiciary in Peru is deciding on the appeal requested by the leader of the Popular Force, Keiko Fujimori. She was arrested on corruption charges 1 week ago. Judges will have to decide whether to grant the daughter of former President Alberto Fujimori provisional release. Keiko is being investigated for money laundering linked to the Brazilian construction company Odebrecht. Authorities arrested her for 10 days as a precautionary measure, though her defense team says there are not enough evidences to build a case against her. We'll be back very soon. Stay with us.
The Pakistani journalist Tariq Ali examines the mass media influence promoted by imperialism. Get access to the analysis of the socio-economic and political life of the whole South America on our screen and platform in English. A critical place committed to the truth to determine the major events that transform the world today. Mondays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. University students in Colombia are mobilizing to protest the education budget. Our correspondent in Bogotá, Paola Fernandez, brings us more.
Students are about to start their strike in many different cities across the country. I want you to meet Professor Adolfo Arteortua, who's been on hunger strike since yesterday. Professor, tell us what message you are trying to send.
We are 3 of us across Colombia who are on hunger strike. We do this as a show of solidarity and love for our students who are fighting for better public education.
Do you fully support students' protests?
Yes, I respect and support them. They know more than anyone how much we need a substantial budgetary allocation.
Students from every region in the country have come to Bogota to mobilize.
We thank Paola Fernandez for that report. More news now. A citizen alliance in Brazil managed to remove a number of fake news articles from various social media sites. Supporters of far-right presidential candidate Jair Bolsonaro are accused of spreading those false stories.
The Supreme Electoral Court has ruled that fake news shared on social media by Carlos Bolsonaro, son of one of Brazil's presidential candidates, be scrubbed from social media. Workers' Party candidate Fernando Haddad welcomed the court's decision.
This was a years-long battle that we finally managed to win, and I can only hope the press will spread this news, just like their lies were spread to people who didn't know better.
Amid the wave of fake news about Fernando Haddad being spread on social media platforms such as WhatsApp, Jair Bolsonaro has refused to take part in any electoral debate, to even explain his government plan. In the latest polls, Bolsonaro's approval rating continues to rise as Haddad's drops.
What is at play here is the very fight for our rights, of choosing our leaders. We have 10 days to turn things around, to show the Brazilian people who Jair Bolsonaro really is, to unmask him once and for all.
A 15-person team from digital strategy agency AM4 is responsible for spreading Bolsonaro-related content in over 1,500 WhatsApp groups, which is then spread further by members of those groups. On top of this, Bolsonaro is also shielded from any media scrutiny, thanks to the support of Record TV, the second-largest TV channel in Brazil. People opposing totalitarianism are ready to stand against media corporations.
We must reach out to the people to clarify what's really happening in our country. We must unmask the underground lies that are affecting these elections. We must unmask the candidate who positions himself as a savior but is actually a violent, lying coward. He's not the person who should lead Brazil.
Outside of the virtual world and TV screens, protesters take to the streets under the Ele Now slogan. In these same streets, artists have paid homage to the message of Pink Floyd frontman Roger Waters, who recently warned Brazilians about the risks of neo-fascism.
The wall represents a division amongst ourselves that causes us to quarrel and turn on each other. The powers that be are influencing division in society. Fake news and media manipulation are leading common citizens to fight with their own neighbors.
By request of Rosa Weber, president of the Supreme Electoral Court, representatives from the Workers' Party and the Social Liberal Party were called to a meeting to discuss these issues. But at the last minute, Bolsonaro's committee asked for it to be postponed.
A mob in Ecuador killed 3 people who were suspected of kidnapping children. When the suspects were brought to a police station in the town of Pozorja, a crowd outside overpowered officers and beat the prisoners to death with rocks and sticks. However, police officers said the suspects were not in fact accused of kidnapping, but rather had been arrested on suspicion of stealing money. 2 Peruvian journalists are being sued for defamation by an archbishop whom they accuse of taking part in sexual abuse cover-up. The journalists Paola Ugaz and Pedro Salinas, both of them have been investigated the abuses and have been sued by the Archbishop of Piura. They have been issued a notice from the court and have to respond within 5 days. If found guilty, they could face up to 3 years in prison and a $60,000 fine.
This is a reprisal. This is vengeance from one of the members of the elite Catholic society against the 2 journalists that investigated and uncovered this Pandora's box.
Archbishop Eguren's attitude in terms of his peers in the church is contradictory and really striking, because doing this is clearly going against what Pope Francis has proposed.
Workers of a museum that showcased the history of the Malvinas Islands are denouncing its closure by the government.
Asuncion works in the Malvinas Museum as a guide. She and her co-workers are worried that the museum is being emptied of its contents and its closure is imminent.
We will live it with a lot of sadness, but not without a fight as we have organized ourselves. We will defend the cause and the rights of the workers.
People from all walks of life, including soldiers, have come together to launch June 10th to try and keep the museum and the cause alive.
Macri can see this museum is a center of the resistance. He tried to make changes here. When school came to visit the museum, they found workers committed to the Malvinas cause. We don't deny this museum was created in a period of history when popular leaders from the region fought for the defense of Malvinas.
As time goes by, the cause is not forgotten. People are collectively standing up to the government for giving away the island's natural resources to the UK.
This government does not support sovereignty. They are working in favor of commercial interests that don't benefit people or the country.
I thought we would progress as we did with the last government, but it didn't work out like that. They betrayed us, and we are going backwards.
Wounds are still fresh, and there are some things that are non-negotiable. The decision to disregard so easily the history behind the island and to sign an agreement with the UK is one of them.
It's worrying that the claim to sovereignty doesn't have strength, because since the return to democracy, Argentina has received a lot of support from international bodies, especially from UN. This support meant that the UK was isolated.
People are worried that Latin America is losing to neocolonialism. The Argentines won't forget the Malvinas cause.
More news now. Mexico is suffering increasing violence and health problems as a byproduct of organized crime and drug trafficking to the U.S.
Drug addiction in Mexico is one of the greatest health sector burdens. According to official figures, this incidence of drug use increased by nearly 50% in the last 7 years. It is especially prevalent among young people. Some believe this wasn't addressed quickly enough. Innovative methods and traditional awareness campaigns could have been used.
I believe that kids are already different. I think these campaigns do the contrary and call more attention.
Maybe with other ways so they can see the experiences and not just a piece of paper.
Despite this, a series of cartoons designed to raise awareness in Mexican children about the risks and consequences of drug use was presented at the National Institute of Psychiatry.
The sectors do not bet on long-term measures, but only on short-term strategies. It seems like we should bank on a constant program that helps our population to decrease these problems.
International support is demanded, especially from the United States, because Mexico is a producer and a bridge to this market. However, one expert believes that President Donald Trump's anti-drug stance towards Mexico is erratic.
He makes generalizations saying that Mexicans are murderers and rapists and traffickers, but there is no evidence that the Border Patrol are modifying their methods, for example.
He also points out that the public health sector has recorded an increase in deaths due to the violence generated by drug trafficking to the United States, which is the main consumer of these illegal substances.
Drug trafficking is going through the border little by little, and it comes back with guns or dollars.
Only 2% of the national health expenditure budget is spent in drug use prevention programs. Organizations such as Mexicans Against Corruption have criticized the government's approach, which resulted in more than 1.5 million children not having access to mandatory vaccines, according to the National Health Plan.
The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development has blacklisted 8 Caribbean countries. They have been flagged by the organization as operating high-risk schemes that sell residency or citizenship. Citizenship by investment schemes allow foreign individuals to obtain citizenship or residency rights on the basis of local investment or against a flat fee. The organization says this can also be used to hide their assets offshore. Prison officers in Trinidad are vowing to walk off the job in response to the shooting death of yet another prison officer. Prison Officers Association President Saron Richards says he and his men are prepared to leave the nation's prison unmanned. 5 prison officers have been murdered in Trinidad so far for the year. Quinoa is fast becoming a great asset in the global fight against hunger and malnutrition. In Bolivia, suppliers must now meet the soaring demand for the food.
Quinoa is a grain-like crop grown for its edible seeds. In Bolivia and in many other countries around the world, it's been dubbed the golden food because of its high nutritional content. Compared to other grains, it's higher in protein, provides energy, fiber, and many vitamins and minerals. No wonder it's considered a superfood.
What self-respecting supermarket does not have a bag of quinoa on its shelves? This product that comes from Andean nations is helping achieve the global goal for eradicating hunger.
The Bolivian government declared 2013 as the International Year of the Quinoa, as a way to encourage consumption and to boost production.
5 to 10 years ago, only about 20 countries actually even care about quinoa. Now there are over 100 countries looking into it. We as a country can also be proud of the way we managed to develop methods of growing quinoa crops in different climates.
The campaign for greater use of quinoa started at home in Bolivia. Ever since the government started its promotional thrust, sales have doubled.
In 2010, the average production per capita was about 1 kilogram of quinoa. Now it's over 2 kilograms. This means that Bolivians are increasing their own use of the seed. We now fully recognize how good it is for health.
One of quinoa's best features is how easily it can adapt to different climates and different soil types. In Bolivia, producers are proud to say that the best quinoa in the planet comes from right here, the shores of the Uyuni Salt Flats.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us.
An occasion to enjoy the cultural diversity that defines our South American essence. Come along to find out the story behind these personalities, traditions, and artistic expressions that unite us as a whole. Real Lives, Friday, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. Police investigators have scored the residence of the Saudi Arabian consul in Turkey as part of the investigations regarding the disappearance of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Police used drones and UV lights while they searched the premises for several hours. Khashoggi was last seen on October 2nd entering the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. People in Russia have paid their respects to the victims of a college shooting in Crimea on Wednesday. They left flowers and candles in the memory of at least 19 people killed in a mass shooting at the technical college in the city of Kerch. The investigative committee has identified the attacker as an 18-year-old student attending the institution. He is suspected to set off a bomb in the cafeteria and shooting at random. He killed himself afterwards.
So 2-3 minutes before the explosion, I left the first building. I was opening the door, I heard the explosion. I turned away, and I heard a shooting. Then it was panic. What followed is unknown.
And Russian President Vladimir Putin has expressed his condolences for the victims of the attack.
I would like to express condolences to relatives of those who died, and express hope that victims will recover as soon as possible. And we will do everything possible for this. People will be informed about the results of the work of law enforcement bodies and special services. Dear friends, in commemoration of those who died, I ask to pay respect to them with a moment of silence.
Clashes between security forces and opponents of President Azali Assoumani have killed at least 3 people on the Comoros island. Assoumani's bid to extend term limits has fueled anger in the Indian Ocean archipelago in recent months. He won a referendum in July on constitutional changes that includes ending the rotation of the presidency between the country's 3 main islands after 1 term. The referendum was, however, boycotted by the opposition.
There were wounded, of course, but there were also deaths. There were 3 deaths. Unfortunately, one of them was an elderly person. What is certain is that these terrorists are primarily responsible for this act.
Russian wakeboarder Nikita Martyanov has taken extreme sports to a new peak when he rode across iceberg in Greenland. He wakeboarded in one of the harshest and coldest places on the planet, where water temperature is often 0 degrees Celsius. His original vessel for the ride broke down, but his crew managed to get a 60-year-old wooden research boat for the adventure. And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesurtv.net/English. And also join us on social media, on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.